everyone, I'm Jen, I'm an alcoholic. I've been through the process with the help of a Big Book Step Study sponsor and meetings like these, people like you, a very loving, understanding higher power with a great sense of humor. I am chipping away at my amends, and I'm working the latter steps on a daily basis to the best of my ability/willingness. Robin, thanks for asking me to speak today. So, I remember the first time I learned that we had to do an inventory of our sex conduct. It was within my first month of sobriety, and it was at this meeting. And I'm not sure what happened. I think I'll have to ask you all about it, but my sponsor and Tina, I think, laughed almost to the point of peeing themselves because I must have been white as a sheet. I was like, we've got to do what now? We got to do what? So I was really sort of apprehensive about this, but anyways. I'm not sure, I haven't pre-planned anything except for one thing I'm going to say at the beginning, but so I'm not sure what's going to come out of my mouth, but I do want to say that stuff could get real. This is, I've said it before in this meeting, this is where I was the most despicable. My sex behavior, my sex conduct, is the place that I look back on and cringe, particularly when I was writing it. But I do want to say this. I'm proof that this process works, because 2 years ago, I would have been really afraid to speak on this step, because I so desperately, and this is my biggest character defect, I so desperately need people's approval. And I wouldn't have wanted to speak on this step because I would have been worried about what you thought about me. Today, you know, I care about you all, I care about your sobriety, I would never want to intentionally hurt you, but honestly, I don't care what you think. And no clapping. But that's the good news. I mean, if you would have known me, and some of you did know me when I came in, that is such a 180 change from where I was, and it's just proof that this process works. So, going through my conduct, you know, listing the names and thinking about where was I selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate, everywhere. And I was constantly selfish, constantly. Here's the thing I came to understand about my sex conduct. 98% of the time, my conduct, my motives, it was never about the other person. I mean, it's the most intimate act you can do with someone, and for me, it was never about them, it was all about me. Always. And I think that's why I find that behavior so despicable. So really trying to flesh that out and get at the root of what I was doing. So I think I have to go a little bit backward. I grew up in New Hampshire, went to Catholic school, and starting in about second grade, I became acutely aware that I liked girls in a way that was different from the way my friends liked girls. And so I sort of knew at a very young age, and we're talking about the 80s, so things were a little bit different, right? Like my students now talk about coming out in junior high, and I'm like, what? You what? So I was very, very aware that I was a gay woman or little girl when I was little. And, you know, growing up in the Catholic Church and having been taught that that was evil, there was a whole snowball effect of it. In New Hampshire, conservative New Hampshire at the time, again, it was the 80s, so there was nobody on TV that there were no role models, so I was a mess. So as I progressed through high school and certainly as I got into college, my sex behavior clearly points to my inability to accept my sexuality. I used men like as beards, basically. First, primarily, I'll show everyone I'm not gay, people who suspect. So I'm gonna date men, I'm gonna sleep with men. partly to convince myself, maybe if I practice this enough, whatever. I'm a mess. I was a mess. So I systematically used men. Here's the other reason why I used men. I thought, and actually this trickled into the way in which I used women. Biggest fear, I am less than. I am less than. I am not good enough, and there is something wrong with me. And so the easiest for me, I think, way to get other people's approval and to see that I am worth something is to be attractive to them, right? The biggest way to gain their approval is to engage in sex with them, right? I mean, I know it's what he wants, I know it's what she wants, so here you go, right? So I just, all over the place, used people. Again, particularly to quiet that fear that I wasn't good enough. The more people were attracted to me, and the more I engaged in those acts, the more I thought, I must be worth something. If he can see something in me that he wants to sleep with me, I must be worth something. If she can see something in me, I must be worth something, right? The other thing, I think that, the other piece of behavior that I was able to recognize through my writing was, I like to people please, right? And that then goes back to getting other people's approval. If I people please, people will like me, okay? And what better way to people please, I thought. Right? It's so sick. Like, again, I told you it was going to get ugly. It's so sick, but it's my truth. I just used people. When I finally did come out and started dating women, similar behavior. It was all about what sleeping with them would say about me. Always. And it was like little notches. This is ugly, and I hate saying it, but it's the truth. They were notches. See, I must be good enough. Click, 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 right? And it was really, really despicable. Part of my other despicable behavior was that I have a really low self-esteem, and I didn't let people in emotionally. And so often when I would engage in sex conduct, very often, almost always, it was never about being in love with the other person, because I was incapable of that, because I was incapable of loving myself, and I was incapable of letting anyone in. Very, very walled, okay? And so here's what I did. I would self-sabotage. So, I knew if I got into a relationship, like a big girl relationship with someone, I would have to let them in, which would mean they would have to get to know me. And if they knew me, they would understand that I was unlovable, okay? So I just kept people at a distance. And again, thought I would people please by just engaging in sex acts with them. So I would self-sabotage. The more unavailable a woman was, the more my little laser beam targets were set on her. If she were in a relationship with someone else, I would pursue her, because I knew that that would not go anywhere, right? If she was straight, watch out. Watch out. So that was me. I think the other thing about this conduct was that I had no self-respect. And so for me, it was like, I never set boundaries. And I assumed that everyone thought about sex the way I thought about sex, which is, it's just fun, it's a one-night stand. And so where was I dishonest? I was never honest with people. I just assumed sex was your reward for growing up, right? And that other people approach sex in the same way, which is one-night stands. They're fun, that's it. And everybody just wanted a one-night stand. It wasn't until, that was a long lesson for me to learn, that people weren't like that people didn't all think like that. But I did. And so I didn't see the harm I was doing to other people. I had no idea that in having these like serial one-night stands, that might not be what other people wanted. That they might actually they might be adult about this, right? And their motives might be more pure. And so I'm sure I hurt people by not calling them back, or by, I was never adult, even when I was in relationships, my version of them when I was drinking, which is awful, a train wreck. But even when I was in relationships, I was never adult enough to end things when I knew I should end things. And so what I would do is either cheat on the person, right, and sort of not cover it up very well so that they would know and break up with me, so that then they were the bad guy, or I would just become so emotionally distant that once again they would break up with me and become the bad guy. I was not adult about any of that. Yeah, I cheated a lot. And the funny thing is, it's not funny at all. The expectation was that if you cheated on me, that was a slight, that it was just unforgivable. Yet I was going around cheating on people. Before I get to like what things are like for me now, I'll end with this, because this is the train wreck moment of my life. At one point, I was having a relationship with 2 women at the same time, and those 2 women were in a relationship together. Neither of them ever knew it. I know. I mean, I told you I self-sabotaged, right? That is self-sabotage. That's self-sabotage. I know. I told you it was despicable. But there's no but there. The point is, that's how sick my behavior was with regard to sex, that I was completely unaware of until I really started coming to these meetings, listening to what other people were saying, and writing. And that's when it came out. And I think I knew about my resentments, and I knew about my part in my resentments. Like, I sort of had, not necessarily how deep it went, but like I had inklings of my part in my behaviors that led to some resentments. I had no idea about this, because I didn't think about it, because I didn't want to think about it, because it was ugly, right? So doing this writing was really eye-opening for me, and I'm grateful for it. So, what should I have done instead? In going through this behavior with my poor sponsor, what should I have done instead? A lot of the times I shouldn't have even been where I was. Most of the time. I have no business going to the Blarney Stone when students are there. No business. No business. And I should, trust and rely on God and check my motives constantly. Constantly check my motives. So the good news about doing the writing is that I'm able to set boundaries today. I mean, the good news about the process, as I told you at the beginning, is that I don't look for outside things to fill that emptiness of self-esteem, right? I trust and rely on my higher power. I know He loves me, and that's always good enough for me. So I have self-respect today, and I'm able to set boundaries. Through this process, I know what I am able to bring to the table in relationships, and I know what I'm looking for in relationships. I also know how to be an adult today. Well, that's sometimes questionable, but like for most of the time, I know, even in my daily interactions, non-romantic with people, I know how to be an adult. So I know what I'm looking for in a partner, and I know what I'm able to bring to the table in that regard. And I think the other really important thing that I learned from the writing of this is I know that sex, like alcohol, is not a solution to any problem. And for me, especially, I gotta be really careful because it often is the problem. Or was the problem, I should say. It often was the problem. And so I need to keep that in mind. So I guess that's it. I just want to say, if you are starting this process or thinking about doing this process, keep at it. And if you're like I was the first month of my sobriety and came here and heard somebody talk about sex conduct, if you're sitting there scared, don't worry. You don't have to get into particulars. You can just be general. But it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it. The fact that I don't treat people the way I used to treat people, I can hold my head up high. And that is a blessing. And the fact that I can make amends to those people on my list that I did systematically use as human credentials, that's a gift. So wherever you are in the process, keep at it, because we'd love to hear from you. So.